I'd like to welcome everybody for joining us. Sorry, I'm just going to shut down a couple of things here on my end. Yeah, so we started this learning series to provide some opportunities for our colleagues from Indigenous communities across, well, Canada for now, maybe Turtle Island eventually, to share about their communities, the work that they do, just to help people understand, I guess, part of what we're doing here is bridging the world of philanthropic foundations with communities as well, making fostering relationships, building connections, and in turn giving some of our colleagues a chance to speak and in essence educate, if you will. Just quickly like to acknowledge some of the Lawson staff and board that are attending, participating along with us, and of course acknowledge all of you for joining too and participating. Just Marcel's here, for the CEO for Lawson, as well as Wanda from our board, and then Christine and Diane and Amanda, who are my colleagues and fellow staff at Lawson. So thank you all for joining, and thank you all for joining us today. The first in the series, obviously, is going to be our friend Demian Lawrenchuk. Demian's from Fox Lake Cree Nation. He's been working for Food Matters Manitoba for a number of years, but as of almost a year ago, became the executive director and brought his harvester program from communities into his work in Food Matters Manitoba. We thought it's such a crucial discussion to have around food sovereignty, food security, conservation, and health and wellness, and knowing that other groups are interested in learning more about this and making connections. We thought we'd provide this opportunity to learn from Demian. So I'll hand it over to Demian. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And hey, everyone. But first, of course, I'd like to really extend the appreciation for this little event here to the Lawson team, so that we can kind of share what we do with Food Matters. But I'll kind of be jumping back and forth with my role as the executive director of Food Matters, but also sharing, a lot of my own personal experience and the journey that I've taken, guided by the elders of not just my home community, Fox Lake Cree Nation, but a lot of the Swampy Cree elders in my neck of the woods around northern Manitoba, and the teachings, and hopefully with that be able to give you all a bit of a strong understanding of what our situation is in northern Manitoba. The way that our communities function, the way that we work together, the challenges that we're faced with, and why food security is so important for us. Also, generally, when I do these kind of things, I like to just talk, tell stories, things like that. Something I've really picked up from the elders that have guided me, using the stories of our teachings. But I figured I'd put a little slideshow together to show you guys some cool pictures from the work that we do from our neck of the woods. I kind of see it. I have a kid, so at least one point in my life, one person thought I might be nice to look at, but to save you guys all from staring at my face this whole time, I'll show you guys some pictures here. Give me 1 second. I'll find. Sorry, I must have closed my presentation. I just got to open it up again here. All right. Sorry about that. I'm a pretty good hunter, not good at technology. All right. So this first slide here is just to set a little bit of the context of, why food security. Of course, it makes a lot of sense for, Indigenous people in our communities up in northern Manitoba. But, for people wanting to support the work, I chose a couple good kind of context setting information pictures here. One is just um, high prices. I believe this picture of tomatoes here is from the community of Brochet, and that's $20 a kilo for tomatoes, and that was a number of years ago. Also showing, the trend here, the bottom center of the page, prices in grocery stores in Manitoba, and how drastically that price keeps rising. Another little picture here to show that even among the provinces, Manitoba is has one of the greatest challenges with food prices, just under Saskatchewan, which is kind of leading the way there. A little price comparison in the top center of the screen, and there one of the ways that we're really guiding our work here is moving away from these subsidies, these food hamper programs, things that are kind of a band-aid fix, and going more into investing into the communities themselves, building up capacity so that we can have long-term solutions. And that's on the left here. You can see on the top left, you can see federal spending on one of the big subsidy programs, Nutrition North, and how the cost keeps increasing. And then on the top right, you can see an article, and actually there's a few studies that are showing that, even though all this money is getting spent in food subsidies, food insecurity is still rising. So, it shows that just these band-aid fixes, they're not getting to the root of the problem, and the cost keeps increasing, and really the need is increasing faster than the cost. So someone ask a question there or make a comment? Oh, okay, sorry about that. So yeah, you can see that despite all the money that's putting in, without a real solution to the root cause, this is an unsustainable trajectory. So I wanted to include also some pictures just to show you guys, who we are up in northern Manitoba. Some of these pictures are my family, some are just from the region. One thing I really liked about the picture on the right of the screen, you can see the little boys with the bow and arrows. That's one thing that, the elders have always told me. If you look at those arrows, you can see at the end, there's like a big blunt tip on it. And that was like the training arrows that the kids would have in our area back in the day. They take a big stick and whittle it down, and there would be that big blunt tip on it. That way, the kids wouldn't have to worry about cutting themselves, but it also worked really well for the entry level to hunting, which was hunting small game like rabbits and grouse. So they get hit with that arrow, and that big blunt tip would, knock the animal down, stun them long enough for the kids to go and get them. A couple other things that stuck out with these pictures, why I chose them, is you can see just how, getting together, gathering is always a huge piece for our people. And one thing you'll see when you start to work with Indigenous communities, due to colonization and a lot of the resurgence of our culture, there's a lot of, I guess, conflict between Christianity and our traditional ways. But one thing that we kind of always talk about is, it doesn't matter what you believe, food always brings us together, and that gathering, that's one of the biggest, most important aspects of our culture. And despite our differences, this food is ultimately the thing that will always bring us together. And this picture in the bottom left here, I'll come back to that in maybe the next slide. But this was the early 1900s. This was one of our really like big popular fishing spots. And so I have a picture of that spot from maybe 5 years ago, of all the fish in the water. So just to show you guys, what our land has to offer to us in terms of sustainability. So here in the bottom, this is that the bottom center is this picture from the same place where those canoes were. And if you look, you can see, and you could see all the fish there. When I stood there, there is literally thousands and thousands of fish right in the water in front of us. So still, 100 years later, we're still sustaining ourselves in the same way in these same areas. Another thing I wanted to drive home here about the importance of food. So these are pictures of my family. There's my great grandpa, my great granny, one of my great uncles, my cousin as a baby there. But you can see everything in this picture here. It all came from the food. Our entire economy, our entire well-being, our education system, everything was based off of that pursuit of food as Cree people in the muskeg. My great grandpa here, you can see he's wearing clothes made out of moose hide. He used to go and get the moose hide, or sorry, he used to go and get the moose. He'd be out hunting, fishing, all that kind of stuff. My great granny, who's pictured in the center here, she would do all the work after the moose was killed. She would turn the hide into leather so that it could be used. She would make clothes for the family. Of course, she would put, in the picture here, she's doing some beading. She would put her beautiful floral beadwork patterns on the clothes. In the bottom left, so some of the extra, there's a moose hide is, I don't know if anybody in the group here has seen it. A moose hide is very, very massive. So, they would have enough for the clothes that my family wore, and then the rest would get sold to, hydro camp, workers at hydro camps and things like that to make a little bit of extra money. So that's what my great grandpa's doing in the bottom corner there. But you can also see on the top left, so my great uncle and my little cousin there, they even knew how to make their own boats. They made their own transportation. I wish I had pictures from the stories that my grandparents used to tell me when they were, living with their grandparents. And in the springtime, they would take the bark off of a birch tree. They would make a canoe with it. They would cut down a tamarack. They would slice it into planks, and they would make dog sleds. Everything just off of this pursuit of food. Connected them to the land with all the resources that they needed to use, with all the technology that they needed in order to survive in this really, really harsh, seemingly harsh land that really, once you get to know it, offers you everything you need to live a beautiful life. So that's, just to kind of show you guys who we are and why food is so important to us. I got a little more here to show you guys some of the work that we do. If I can figure out how to change. There we go. So here's some of the leading harvesters and hunters that we work with. Had to throw myself in there. You can see my face covered in mosquitoes. Just trying to take a nice picture. But so that's me with a caribou in Fox Lake. Top left is our main harvester in Brochet. In the center is a gentleman from York Factory, York Landing. The bottom right is a nice communal harvest that we supported right at the coast at the Hudson Bay this past fall. Kind of center on the bottom here, that's one of the main mentors, for me, but also for a lot of the work that we do. And I had to throw up on the top right. That's he just passed away this year, but that's the man that taught me everything I know out in the bush, and really, pulled me out of my struggles and really taught me everything I needed to know. So this slide, what this kind of shows is, we've learned in our journey not just to invest in projects, but to invest in the people. And in each of the communities that we work with, really in each of the communities all over the place, it doesn't matter what kind of struggles are going on, kind of who has what job, who's in the leadership, who's in chief and council, who has positions in the office. There's always at least somebody in the community that's dedicated to helping their community, helping their people, that's, about this life. And what we pride ourselves in and what we really, really emphasize and prioritize is building those really deep relationships within the community, finding the people who are trying to make change and just investing into them as much as we can, with resources, with training, just empowering them to do what they need to do, employing them so that they could focus on the work, knowing that their families are cared for, knowing that their bills are paid. And, from there, building them out, a team of support within the community, but also connecting them with the communities around them, and building this broad, capable community across northern Manitoba that can start to really make change happen and really, navigate all the challenges as they come and start to build up momentum that will last, the test of time. Next, I kind of wanted to show, and this, the order of it also, it builds off of the success that we have with the hunting programs. This is a huge challenge that a lot of people and a lot of organizations have been trying to kind of tackle in northern Manitoba, and that's agriculture. I've been I just moved down to Winnipeg 3 or 4 years ago. Before that, for great number of years, I was working on the ground trying to get agriculture going. I have a lot of friends in other communities that have the same challenge, and there's a lot of support going out there to get agriculture going in northern Manitoba, but there's so many challenges. It's at times it feels impossible to start to make lasting progress. And one of the things that we found is that by focusing on what people are already really good at and using that to build momentum, to start to have serious immediate impacts, and then to break down the agricultural challenges into small digestible pieces, and to slowly integrate that into the already existing seasonal cycles, traditional seasonal cycles of harvesting. It moves away from these daunting, almost impossible challenges of how are you going to bring in a whole new aspect to a culture in northern Manitoba, where the growing season in some places is barely a month and a half. It's a very, very unforgivable season. You think about growing, getting a commercial greenhouse going in a season where you only have a month and a half to work. You might, if you're lucky, you might be afforded 3 mistakes, missing watering plants 3 times. Anything after that, the crop's dead. There's no time for a new crop. A failure like that, putting so much effort, time, and resources into it, it's very demoralizing. It's only human nature to start to lose hope, with even small failures like that. Whereas when you really focus in on the things that are having success, on the things that people really are good at, you can start to compound those successes. You can start to build up the momentum, and then you find ways to just integrate the agriculture piece by piece into those existing harvesting cycles, like I said. And I'll talk about that a little more. So those are the pictures I wanted to show you guys. So before I kind of get back into the work that we do, one of the things that I wanted to share with you guys is a little bit about the Cree worldview, the Swampy Cree in particular. And of course, indigenous cultures are there's a great number of them, and there's a lot of diversity between them. So this is just, the Swampy Cree way, but it's a good, really understanding. And Cree is, I think it's the largest landmass tribe in the world, definitely in Canada. So understanding the Cree way gives you a really large geographical area that you can understand. And even the other indigenous cultures in Manitoba, for thousands of years, we've influenced each other, we've worked with each other. There's a lot of similarities despite the differences that you'll see. So one of the things that when you learn about the Cree culture, one of the things that's evident all the way from the very first creation story throughout all of our legends and all of our teachings, all of our stories, is the importance of community. And this is, one of the, going back to agriculture, one of the big challenges that we really see trying to get these new projects going is our whole way of life, our whole culture. It's all about working together. It's all about community. So when you have, one person that kind of gets motivated, one person that, gets that spark going and goes in on this endeavor, um, they'll push it as far as they can. But within our communities, there's a lot of challenges. So just the nature of life and the challenges in our communities, when this person doesn't have a network of support around them, when they don't have other people to work with, it's only a matter of time before the progress stops, before life might take that person in another direction. And the community's back at square one with gardening. And I've seen this time and time again, where a community has a phenomenal agricultural program, but it rests fully on the ability of that one individual. So our solution to that, and looking at these teachings, looking at the lessons that we're learning, is really trying to spread the education, spread the opportunities as widely throughout the region as possible, so that we can begin to have a strong pool of people to build an agricultural community out of, so that people are supporting each other, so that if somebody has to stop, people are able to kind of take over and keep the progress going. So what I wanted to share about that was, I don't know if any of you guys have heard some of the Cree creation stories, but they say however many billions of years ago, when the earth was first created, they say, the creator in English, but in the Cree language, the word that we use is gisemantu. And gisemantu, it doesn't actually mean the creator. It means the gentle spirit. It means the loving spirit. And that kind of, shows the essence of the culture, even that spirit that created everything. We always refer to how full of love that spirit is. So they say Gisemantu had a thought that he wanted to create this earth. He wanted to create life on this earth. And in creating the earth, he needed to create the right, balance of environments, so that the people could survive here. And like I said, right from this first moment, the example or the precedent for community was set for us, because that all-powerful being, that creator, so to speak, could have just made life and made everything just like that. But the first thing that creator did was call for help, was create a community of support. So the creator called out for the oldest grandfathers to step forward and to work together for there to be life on earth. And the first one that stepped forward we call Pisan, which is the sun. And the sun stepped forward and brought the light and brought the warmth for the earth. But just that sun alone, things were too bright, things were too hot. The world was too intense, nothing could live here. So the next one, creator called for more help. And the next one that came forward, we call Pieso or Pineso. And that's the thunderbird. That was the one that came to balance the heat of the sun, the one that came to bring water so that there could be life. But even that wasn't enough for life on earth. So the next of those old grandfathers that came forward, we call Notin. Notin is the wind. And with the wind came the air. And with those three things, with the sun, the water, and the air, life was made possible on earth. And the animals started the animals, the insects, the birds, everything started to take form and to live on the earth. But even then, it wasn't enough for the people, and the people needed more help. So the way the story goes was, initially, when Gisemantu called upon the animals and the four-legged beings for a representative that would lead them in caring for the people and helping the people. The story goes, the first one that stepped forward was the moose. But the moose was told that he was told, no, you're too angry. And sure enough, that aggressive, angry nature of the moose came charging at the creator, and the creator stuck a hand out and stopped that moose in mid-charge. And one of the reminders of that legend, if anybody here has killed a moose or is planning on killing a moose in the near future, when you knock that moose down, if you put your hand on the forehead of that moose, there's a flat spot that's the perfect size for an adult's hand to fit there. And that's kind of one of those reminders. So that moose was stopped. The next one that came forward, we call Paskaimistos, and that's the buffalo. So that buffalo came forward and made a somewhat of a covenant with the people. That buffalo promised, I will give my entire being to the people so that they can survive, with one exception. They must always respect me. And if they always respect me, I'll always provide them with my food, with my meat, with my skin, with my bones, for everything that the people need. And in that way, life was made possible for the people. You know, it's also in our way, we understand that the people, we were the last ones to come down on the earth. And because we were the last of all the beings on the earth, we're the most ignorant. We have the least amount of wisdom, the least amount of experience. And because of that, we rely on every single thing on this earth that was here before us to teach us, to learn how to live a good life. You know, so with that first creation story, that kind of set that example for the way that we operate, for the way that we kind of have that real communal aspect to our life. But not just that, also that example of, you know, like I said, with us having the least amount of wisdom, the least amount of experience, that set forward that path that we would go and learn from all of creation. So what comes from that story, you know, we have an oral tradition in our culture. We don't write things down, but there's a lot of wisdom, there's a lot of teachings that our people have held on to for thousands of years, and there's no way that people would just remember that. So the way that our culture has survived is that the land around us, even our language, the lodges we have for our ceremonies, these are the textbooks. These are the living textbooks that hold these lessons and hold these teachings for us. So why is this relevant? You know, we look at the way that our communities are today, and you know, there's a reason why we're talking about reconciliation. There's a reason why we're talking about land acknowledgements and, you know, all that kind of stuff. There's a reason why we're talking about colonization, decolonization, and, you know, we're living it in our communities. The pictures that I showed you at the start of this presentation with the little slideshow, you know, you could see when my family, even my own family, was able to go out and harvest trees and to make a boat, when they were able to go out into the bush and make their own clothes. You know, there was a time when the communities in northern Manitoba were in a very, very tight-knit network of communities working together that made up a nation, a very independent, healthy and sustained nation. You know, we look at one of the communities we work with, for example, is Shamattawa. And Shamattawa is like a 2-day drive from Winnipeg, and they don't even have year-round road access. It's a 2-day drive when the winter road is open for a couple months. When that winter road isn't open, it's only fly-in access. So these are very, very, very isolated communities. And it begs the question to, you know, what the heck are people doing up there? If they can't get food, you know, how the hell did they end up there? But before colonization, these were the oases of food. These were the places that our people survived at. These were the places that our people flourished at. Now, what happened to these communities is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the term, the Indian problem, but in my case, it's using technology. But in the true sense of the Indian problem, It's it's a problem that a budding nation had, a nation called Canada. You know, when Canada was becoming a nation, they realized that there was untold billions, trillions of dollars of resources, you know, from sea to sea to sea, with a problem, and that was the Indian problem. That there was already, um, I don't know how many, like, you know, dozens and dozens of fully functioning independent nations that already own these resources, that use these resources, that control the land. And in order for Canada to tap into the wealth of these of this land, they had to essentially destroy these nations. They had to destroy these communities so that they were powerless to um, you know, to maintain their sovereignty over these resources. So our experience of Canadian history is a series of experiments that have been done to us from the Canadian government to weaken our people, to weaken our communities, to destroy our society so that we can't hold on to our possessions anymore. And, you know, not pointing any blame, we are where we are. This is where we are today, and this is what we have to deal with. The results of this turn of history is that these once fully independent, self-sustaining communities are now completely broken and dependent. Now Canada has access to all the resources within its borders, but it also has the bill to cover for sustaining all of these communities. And not only is it a very costly bill for our country to be, you know, doing all these food subsidies, to be sending all this food up north, to be sending all this fuel, to be sending welfare checks, to be funding all these you know, band departments, health departments, all that kind of stuff. But on the human aspect of it, the effects of colonization have really, really done a number on not just our society, our communities, our family, and the individuals. You know, before I came to a place where I knew how to just go out in the bush and get food for my family, get food for my people. Um, it took me a very, very long time to get to this place. It was a long journey. You know, before I came to this place, I uh, I was addicted to a lot of drugs. I was addicted to alcohol. I was essentially I was a cancer in my community. You know, I had really kind of succumbed to the effects of colonization, the abuse in my own family, the abuse in my community, and I was just another harmful influence, you know, spreading this ongoing destruction to our community. Now, when I it was actually it was when I found out I was having a daughter that a light kind of went off, you know, when whether in my mind or in my spirit that I needed to change. It was like I went out of my body, I looked at myself and I saw a monster, and I knew I needed to change. So what I did was I went and I connected with the elders. I had a rule for myself that whenever an elder needed help, I wouldn't say no. And sort of I guess a little bit of information there. The reason why I came to that conclusion with the elders, for one, I was always told, you know, that this is how we heal, that this is how we become strong again. But also living in my community, you know, I'd look out the window a lot of times, whatever, I'd be going out to party, going out to drink, but I'd look down the street, I'd look out the window, and I'd see the elders every morning getting up and packing their stuff for the day, whether it was their snow machine or their boat or their quad. You know, they'd be loading up their rifle, their grub box, their food, their nets, whatever it was. And I'd see those old men struggling by themselves. So one of my cousins told me, he said, you know, just go ask them if they'll take you out. Like, they're dying for help. They don't have help. So I worked up a bit of a, you know, I'm a pretty shy guy when I don't have to get, you know, in front of people and talk. So I worked up the confidence. I went out, and it was actually the elder that I mentioned that was pictured here. His name was Robert Beardy. that I went over to his place. I asked if I could help him, and he was super happy. And I started going out with him. And it was after that I made the promise to myself that if these elders, whenever they ask for help, I can't say no. And what happened was I went from like partying 24/7, from fighting 24/7, all this violence and all that kind of stuff, to the year before I moved down from Fox Lake to Winnipeg here. I spent about half of the year with that old man sleeping out in the bush, in tents, whatever, out in the bush. Um, no, more than half a year. Yeah, it was about a little more than half the year. And the remainder of the year, we went out on day trips. So all of a sudden, I started going out all year round, whether I was sleeping out in the bush or just going out on day trips. I started going out and reconnecting with the culture, finding my purpose, finding, tapping into the actual teachings that have sustained our people for so long, that have taught us how to be well. Now, why this story is important is because, again, we look at the challenges that colonization has put onto our communities. We used to be in the middle of all of the resources that we needed to survive. We never, ever, ever would have used the word isolated. Now, all of our communities are isolated. That's one area of it. You look on the other area of it now, where change comes from, it comes from the people. Now, the people that aren't making change, a lot of the times they were like me, and they were keeping the status quo. They were digging us further down into the hole. And what happens in a community like that, what happens on the individual level like that, is when, in my case, when a young man doesn't have purpose, when a young man doesn't have even the hope or the will to live, they're very destructive. There's a lot of anger that happens there, and the anger is very destructive. So it's a self-defeating cycle. It's almost an endless cycle of just destruction. And the solutions are so simple, but if somebody doesn't care, that this is one of the biggest lessons that I learned in my life. If somebody doesn't care, it doesn't matter how simple the solutions are. It doesn't matter how many solutions there are. If somebody doesn't care, there's literally no hope. And before I sobered up and really started to follow this traditional way of life, I was trying to kill myself with drugs. I literally gave up hope. The only reason why I didn't lie was, ironically enough, all the previous years of drug use gave me an inhuman tolerance to to drugs. But that's just to say that the solution here is not investing in projects, and it's not investing in small little one-off projects. The solution is investing into communities, and you can only properly invest into communities once you start to make the relationships. You need to take the time, you need to take the long road and really start to build these relationships with communities. Find the people who have taken that journey in their own life, who are trying to heal, who are trying to make change. And you connect with those people, you double down and support them as much as you can. You build them a network of support, you build them a community, and you start to go down that road together. One of the other teachings that I wanted to share is the teaching of sharing. And this comes big into food too, because back in northern Manitoba, we have traditional harvesting cycles. Every time of year, we're harvesting something, and it changes many times. Right now, people are doing ice fishing up in northern Manitoba. They're hunting caribou. Pretty soon, the geese are going to get there. Everybody's going to be hunting geese. They're going to be hunting ducks. And then the water's going to open. The ice is going to melt. The fish are going to be, certain fish are going to be spawning, and they're going to be harvesting those fish, and so on until we get back to the spring again next year. And what you'll see going into our communities, this time of year, or even I'll start with our new year, which is late April, early May, when we're hunting the geese. You go around, and I'll use one example here, my community of Fox Lake. In the start of May, you go around the community and you could smell the smell of the stinkier smell of burning feathers. of the geese getting singed, but you come into our houses and you can smell the goose roasting in the oven. You can smell the goose boiling on the pot. One of the biggest things in our culture is to always have food available. It doesn't matter if it's your last meal that you have in your fridge. You prepare that, you have that ready. If somebody comes into your house, you split that last bite of food with them. That's one of the strict rules in the Cree culture. But and then after the geese, when the ice recedes, you come into our houses and you'll smell that pickerel frying. And it's all about sharing. This food is all about sharing. And the word sharing in the Cree language is amahamatoin. Now that word sharing, where that comes from, is ayamitik, which is the fish spawn. And the way that our people kind of got this teaching and understood this value, which became a law in our culture, is by going out and by participating in the fish spawn. The one example I'll give here is with the pickerel. It seems to be almost everybody's favorite fish. So in the springtime, when the ice melts, back home, the pickerel, they go from the lakes and then they go into the rivers and the streams. They swim upstream and they go find their spawning places. Now what happens is that pickerel's their whole life, they're just swimming around trying to find things to eat. They're just trying to build up their muscles and their energy levels for this one time a year that they swim upstream and they go and spawn, whether male or female, they go and participate in the spawn. And during this time, that picture I showed you guys with the fish, with maybe a dozen fish just in that one little picture, this is where I really learned this teaching firsthand, and where it really sunk in, and I understood what sharing is, what amahamatuan, where it comes from ayamitik. So what I started to see was that we would go and we would fish there, and thousands and thousands and thousands, countless thousands of fish would come past right in front of us. We wouldn't even need to bring fishing rods. We would go to these spots. We'd take a roll of snare wire, rabbit snare, and we'd break a stick, like a nice strong willow. We'd break a stick off of the riverbank, and we'd tie a rabbit snare the same way that as if we were snaring rabbits. And we'd make a loop about that big. We'd tie it to the end of the stick, and you walk up to the riverbank. The fish see you, they scatter, but you stand there perfectly still, and those fish start to come back. They lose sight of you. They start to come back. And when those fish come back, you lower that stick down and you slowly, slowly, slowly get that snare to that pickerel's face, and you slide it over their face. And as soon as you got it over their face, you whip that stick and you pull the fish out of the water. And in doing that, in a couple of hours, you can have a couple hundred pickerel right there. And so we would go out there and do that every spring, year after year. Mid to late May, we would go out and do that. And what I started to notice is that the black bears would come and fish beside us. Those big black bears would come 20, 30 feet away from us, and they'd be pulling the fish out of the water too. And for us, the suckers and the pickerel, they spawn around the same time. I would get, maybe a couple dozen suckers for my grannies that really like sucker head soup. And I cut the heads off of the suckers. I give it to them. I know it maybe doesn't sound like an appetizing kind of soup. And then I'd keep the meat for myself because I love smoked sucker. But most people really love pickerel. So we were going after the pickerel. And what we would do is we would look at the tail of the fish. At the bottom of the tail on a pickerel, there's a white spot. So we'd be looking through the water, trying to find that little white spot on the tail of a fish, and that's how you know it's a pickerel, and you pull that one up. But the black bears, pardon my language, they didn't give a shit. They would pull anything they could out of the water, those hungry black bears. And what I started to notice, I would pull a fish out and its guts were torn out. it would have a big, some of them would have a bite out of them, some of them would have claw marks in them, but almost all their guts were torn out. So I started to pay attention and watch the bear and wonder what's going on here. And the bear would pull the fish out of the water, and it would eat the guts, it would eat the eggs, the richest part, the most nutrient dense part of the fish. That bear would take its choice cut, he'd take his equivalent of the steak out of the fish, and he didn't care anymore for the fish. That bear would throw the fish away. And so many fish I would see that were just what I thought initially was wasted. And what I started to realize was that teaching of a Mahamatun, sharing, that the fish, and this is how I saw how the ecosystems all kind of work together. The fish had one goal in life, and that was to spawn, that was to create life in its own. That fish would swim up and it would do its one duty. And in that one duty, it gave life to the entire world around it. Now, what happened with the bear is the bear would pull the fish out of the water, it would eat its fill, and it would leave the fish. It's a huge celebration of life, the fish spawn. But the only animal, other than the eagle, who could swoop down and pick up the fish, the only animal in our domain that could pull the fish out of the water was the bear. Now, all those fish that the bear would leave lying around, what I initially thought was waste, the fox would come and eat the fish, the marten would come and eat the fish, the little mice would come and eat the fish, the little birds, and what the animals didn't eat, the insects would come and eat, and they would pick away at the fish. And what the insects didn't eat would leach down into the moss, and the roots of the trees, the roots of the medicines would take the nutrients from the fish. And it was in that way that I truly understood what our ecosystems are about, what our world is about, what I truly understood what life is from a Cree perspective, in the way that we all work together. But also not just the way that essentially food security works out in the bush, but also the importance, again, of investing in the individual, and not just individual on their own, but building that community of support, really taking the time to make those relationships and build the capacity of the communities. Because on one end, we had someone, a young person like me, that my whole life was about, fighting and doing drugs and really destroying my community. But once I found my purpose, just like that fish that found their one purpose, they're able to work with the community to uplift the world around them. So I'll end it there. We'll leave 9 minutes, I guess, for questions. I'm a, what do you call that? Like a blabbermouth. I can talk for a week, but I'll cut it short there. Anybody have any questions?
Please feel free, and if you just want to reflect on what Demian's shared, feel free to. Thank you so much, Demian. It's always brilliant to listen to you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. If there's no questions, maybe I'll speak on. Oh, I see a hand up. Wanda?
Hi, Demian. Again, my family is from, my mother's family is from Haudenosaunee, grew up on the Shasquara Reservation. My father is Algonquin from the Gitaganzibi. So yes, we will be moose hunting, but it's only April here. So I really appreciated everything that you had to say. In terms of the sovereignty around the work that Food Share Manitoba does. I mean, we in philanthropy, there's words that are used, food security, food sovereignty, and food justice. How would you educate someone who is trying to even understand? Because I mean, I have my definition of what food sovereignty is and what food justice is. Do you have any reflections on that? Just for us to keep learning, like you said, from other nations.
That's a good question. I think, and it's funny, I've been working in food sovereignty for like more than my whole adult life, and I never heard that term until I moved down to Winnipeg. So, not so big on so much the terms, but I think it's a really good term, to capture what it's all about. Like it's not just that we have the food, but that we have sovereignty over it. And to be able to produce our own food comes with a whole other string of things that really uplift the society, right? And it ties into having the purpose. It ties into being able to work together to support each other, to build back that economy that can sustain ourselves as independent, and not just, with our hands out, which, sitting with your hand out comes with a whole other string of negative impacts, to the spirit and to the mind of the person, that just, I guess, exacerbates the problem and makes it worse.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And everything that you said just resonates. And I completely, the way that you shared your stories, it actually, you can feel it, like you can feel it in me. And I do hope that as we all keep moving on, that and keep this learning, that at some point you'll be able to feel it as well as hear it. Sonia, I want to go off for your time.
Thank you.
Just a couple more minutes. Anybody feel free to share, speak, question, comment? Marcel.
Hi, Demian. Thanks. I love listening to you. In the photos you showed at the beginning, you see some kids there, right, on the farm, and they seem really happy and excited and that type of thing. How do you get the kids really excited about food and that food sovereignty? And can you tell us a bit about that?
For sure, yeah. Kids are the easy part. It's how do you get the adults off their asses? That's the real question. For me, I would always, like, when I first started working with gardens and greenhouses back home in Fox Lake, I kind of already had was already known to the kids as like taking them out, whether, taking them out to go fish with the elders or bringing like rabbits to the school. So when they would see me walking somewhere, they'd come running up. Oh, what are you doing? Can we come? And summertime we'd walk to the garden, and so there's already that natural curiosity that the kids have. All the better if they know that you're a fun guy who's always doing something cool. But with or without that, there's kids have that, the world is a beautiful place to a child. They have that curiosity, and they have that energy that never seems to lessen. So for them, it's really easy. So and that first aspect of it, that'll get them to the garden, that'll get them to the greenhouse. The biggest thing, though, to keep them active, and to keep them coming, is to give them the freedom to explore, to get their hands dirty. You know, don't get too kind of tied up in like, we need to have progress. We need to, like, I'm coming here, I only have this much time, I need to get this stuff done, kids have to stay out of my way. Factor in the extra time for the learning, for the mistakes. It's totally fine to come in and do something with kids knowing full well you're going to have to come back and fix it later, because that's that investment into the future. That's the way you get that spark going in those kids. And beyond just letting them feel important, letting them explore the activity, whatever it is, and really speaking to their interest and to their curiosity. When we're talking about food, it's like with the kids, it's harder to lose them, because you bring them into the garden, you pick some carrots out, even if they're not even fully formed yet, you let them eat the carrots. You take them out for berries, they get to eat the sweet berries. You take them out fishing, you cook the fish with them, all of a sudden they're hooked. They're going to keep coming back. So with kids, it's really easy. You just have to know how to have the patience, and how to really, like, make them feel special, make them feel important, give them an actual role that that they could start to develop their own skills with.
Thanks, Demian.
Very excellent. Got 2 minutes left. Anybody have anything you want to share with Demian or the rest of us?
Yeah, so not that much time left, so I just really want to say again, thank you everyone for coming out here and sharing this moment and listening to me speak. Thank you to Lawson. How do you motivate adults? That's the great question. Unfortunately, it comes down to money. That's the best way to motivate an adult. But just what I want to say onto that is, we joke about that a lot, having to pay adults for their time, but that's something that we're really, really, really emphasizing as an organization, employing people in the North, because with my journey through this, when I first started, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of places were like, oh, we'll give you fishing rods, we'll give you a net, go revolutionize your world, knowing full well I had to have a full-time job, raise my daughter, try and learn the ceremonies, trying to learn the language. There's no time for anything. So I guess that's not just about motivating the adults, but also respecting that they are an adult, that they do have a family to take care of. And if you can find a way to pay people to do the work, all of a sudden they can fully lean into the work, and you could start to have some lasting progress.
Awesome. Thank you, Demian. Well, as it's we're at that time, I just want to thank everybody for participating and obviously listening and asking some questions, and just of course thank you so much for sharing, Demian. Just always awesome, and look forward to connecting with you again, and hopefully made some connections and relationships today too. So yeah, with all that, I'd like to wish everybody a great day, great long weekend. Hopefully you all get, and stay tuned for episode 2. Should be around June-ish. We're just working on it right now, and we'll send out information once we have that together for you.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks again. Take care, everyone.
Take care.